Hello and welcome to this edition of Wineskins, a program that features reflections on the lives of the saints and sacred scriptures, along with information on topics and issues from a Catholic perspective. I'm Father Jim Corda. Wineskins is brought to you by the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts, a division of the Society of St. Paul. On our show today, I will interview Sister Norma Roppel and Sister Regina Rogers in part one of a three-part series from the television show Spotlight. We will also look at the life of St. Peter Claver, as well as reflections on the readings for this 23rd Sunday in Ordinary Time. That and more coming up on Wineskins. Right before school began, I spoke with Principal Mark Vollmer of Cardinal Mooney High School in our current issue segment. Joining me now is Mark Vollmer, who is the principal at Cardinal Mooney High School. Welcome to Wineskins.
Thank you.
Is the primary leader really in the high school there. How do you see your role? What's your primary mission for you personally as principal at Cardinal?
Personally, it's really just my role to equip the teachers with everything they need to provide the education of the kids. I've always said I've never pretended to be an expert in any of the subjects that we teach. That's what they're for. But, if I can do something to help facilitate and improve the education they're going to give the kids, I'm going to do whatever it takes.
It's interesting because when I talk with people in various positions and careers, I often wonder what got them interested in that. What got you interested, first of all, obviously in education, and maybe second of all in Catholic education?
Well, as I started out my college career, I started out as a music performance major, nothing to do with education, and it was actually a conversation with Dr. Stephen Gage at YSU who prompted me to think that education might be a route to go. The more I got into it, the more I got excited about it. Ended up getting a music education degree starting out in Youngstown, then Maplewood, then eventually at Cardinal Mooney in the Catholic schools. The experience I had with the kids just really furthered my drive and passion for what it was we were doing. When it came time to getting my master's, I thought I would do administration. A lot of my colleagues were just doing it to get the master's because they needed to. The more I started doing that, the more excited I got in that realm, the management side of things. And it really piqued my interest to know that I had extra talents and abilities that could be used in other ways. And, just being able to, like I said, provide the teachers with what they need to provide the great education they do is really furthering my drive still.
Well, we know that a lot of wonderful things have happened over the summer in the structure and institution in the building at Cardinal Mooney. Give us briefly an idea of what went on and what they have to look forward to.
It's a 3-year project we're working. All the work is being done over the summer. They will be doing some over some of the breaks that they can, but logistically speaking, basically it's going to be a reinvented building completely on the inside. New floors, new ceilings, drop-down ceilings, completely wired for technology, the new latest things that we can do, and even expandable in the future when we do add cameras, add other technology. It's very easy to do as opposed to what we had before. The entire front facade of the building, the main classroom area, has been replaced, so it's not a huge window pane that goes from floor to ceiling. It's actually broken up with brand new brickwork, new windows. It's essentially going to be a great atmosphere. The kids aren't going to know what hit them when they get back. It's new lighting, new everything. We're going to have new technology outfitted, really just bringing kids into the 21st century of education where they need to be.
And isn't that important to do that, to continue to not only allow the kids to grow in education and so forth, but your own curriculum to do that as well?
Absolutely.
Because if you don't do that, you're not doing them any favors by not moving along. Really.
And we're actually forging, in terms of curriculum, a semi-partnership with YSU. We've been talking to some of the professors there in terms of what it takes to be a successful college freshman nowadays, because even when I went to school, it's completely different now. And they've really taken a look at what we've offered, and over the next couple of years, we're going to see some great changes that really do prepare them for the collegiate world.
Well, obviously, there's some core values that are always constant, good education, good academics, good discipline, and good service, religious background. What would you see as kind of a vision for Cardinal Mooney down the road, like let's say within the next 5 to 10 years?
In the next 5 to 10 years, I see us expanding upon our service. I mean, that's always been one of our staples. Kids come out with countless amount of service hours, helping out different parts of the community. Colleges do look at that as a big part of applications now, even more so than when I was there. Any extracurriculars they can do, we've expanded a couple of those. Any interest the kids have. We instituted a robotics program. We have a sci-fi club. I mean, everything you can imagine that kids want to do, we want to be able to provide for them. And I really see us just expanding where we're at right now. Like with the new building, with the new technology, the kids are going to be completely prepared for the world as they're going to be encountering it.
Tell us what kind of challenges lie ahead for you and for, I think, Catholic education in general.
Well, obviously, we've seen a general decline in enrollment, and it's always been my hope that I would love to see every Catholic family, all of a sudden sending their kids to Catholic school. I think the only thing that is hindering us is basically just not having the opportunities that all the public schools have. And the facilities, obviously, we can't pass a levy to do something. It's all based on dollars that come in from alumni. But I really see, like I said, us building upon where we're at, just really having the kids understand, and colleges know that, the great futures do start at places like Cardinal Mooney and within Catholic education altogether.
Well, Mark Vollmer, we certainly appreciate your presence on Wineskins today. We certainly thank you for your leadership role at Cardinal Mooney as the principal there. We wish you Godspeed, lots of blessings, and we know that you'll do well and continue to build up that community as you serve them in the Lord's name.
I'll do my best. Thank you very much for having me.
For Wineskins, I'm Father Jim Corda. This coming Wednesday, the Church celebrates the feast of St. Peter Claver. To tell us more is Jim Kravanik.
Born in Catalonia, Spain, Peter Claver entered the Society of Jesus at the age of 20 after completing his studies at the University of Barcelona. Assigned in Mallorca, Peter met the saintly Jesus lay brother Alfonso Rodriguez, who urged him to volunteer as a missionary to South America. He left Spain in April 1610 and landed in Cartagena, Colombia, and was ordained to the priesthood there in 1615. The slave trade had been flourishing in the Americas for almost 100 years, and Cartagena was a central clearinghouse. In spite of its condemnations by Pope Paul III and Pope Pius IV, this inhuman practice continued. Peter Claver began to work under the direction of a fellow Jesuit who spent 40 years ministering to the slaves. Peter enlisted the help of catechists and interpreters, and in the years that he ministered to the African slaves, it is estimated he baptized more than 300,000. In 1650, Peter Claver fell victim to an epidemic that was raging through the city of Cartagena. He never fully recovered from the sickness and could no longer carry on his ministry. Abandoned and forgotten by most of the people, he died on September 8, 1654. But then the people remembered him, and he was given a public funeral at the expense of the state. He was never again forgotten and was canonized in 1888 by Pope Leo XIII, together with his former companion, Alfonso Rodriguez of Mallorca. Pope Leo XIII also named him patron of all those who ministered to blacks in any part of the world. The opening prayer of the Mass states that God offers all peoples the dignity of sharing in his love. Although somewhat shy and withdrawn by temperament, Peter Claver was forceful in his insistence that the slaves from Africa were human beings and had human and religious rights. Very early in his ministry as a young priest, he declared that he would be a slave of blacks forever. As soon as a slave ship arrived, Peter would be there to minister to black people, many of whom were sick or dying. It is estimated that out of every shipload, 1/3 of those blacks on board died en route. Once the slaves were sent out to work in the mines or on the plantations, it was impossible for Claver to keep in touch with them, except for an occasional mission tour. Consequently, the majority of the Catholic slaves had received at most a rudimentary instruction in the faith. The petition of the opening prayer is that we may be strengthened to overcome racial hatreds and to love each other as brothers and priests. St. Peter Claver once said to an assistant, "We must speak to them with our hands before we try to speak to them with our lips." Consequently, he met every slave ship with medicines and whatever food he could beg. He nursed the sick personally in spite of the stench of the pens in which the poor slaves were herded together with no hygienic facilities. Through his love and care for them, he hoped to lead them to a love for Christ. He taught them this prayer: Jesus Christ, Son of God, you will be my father and my mother and all my good. I love you much. I am sorry for having sinned against you. Lord, I love you much, much, much. The Feast of St. Peter Claver is celebrated in the United States as a reminder to all Christians to work for racial justice, not for blacks alone, but for all minority groups and immigrants. For Wineskins, I'm Jim Krivenek from St. Michael Parish in Canfield.
Today we're going to talk with the Ursuline Sisters of Youngstown. And joining me is Sister Regina Rogers and Sister Norma Ruppel. It's such a pleasure to have you both on the show today.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
And I know we're going to hear some wonderful things about the Ursulines that are near and dear to our hearts here in the diocese and beyond. And perhaps for the folks that are with us, we can give a little flavor for the history and the beginnings of your order.
Well, to talk about our beginnings, we have to go back to northern Italy in 1535, St. Angela Merici, who is our founder. And she founded the community on November 25th, 1535. And her goal was to fill a need. She saw that at the time, women only had two choices. They either were married or they entered a religious community, a monastery, and were cloistered. And she felt that there has to be a third option where you can commit your life to Christ and be in the world, not of the world, but be in the world. And so that's what the Ursuline Sisters were founded to do. Angela looked around and saw what the needs were, and that's where she directed her company, her followers. And down through the ages, we've been known as educators because that was a great need at the time, especially the education of women and young girls. Angela felt that if you educated a woman, you educated a family. So the Ursulines have always been known as educators, although that's not why she founded the community. From Angela's time, we go to France. The French Ursulines landed in Quebec, so they were the first religious women in North America in 1639. The French Ursulines also were the first religious women in the United States proper. They landed in New Orleans in 1727. The Youngstown Ursulines were founded from Cleveland and Toledo in 1874. We came at the request of Father Brown, pastor of St. Columba, to educate the children at St. Columba School. And from there, we ended up working in many of the developing Catholic schools at the time. Ursuline High School, Ursuline Academy, really, was founded in 1905 as a day school for girls. And as the notion of finding the need, both at St. Columba and Ursuline High School, nuns really only taught girls. But in both places, we were asked to teach boys. So at St. Columba, we started teaching boys, and in 1930, Ursuline High School admitted boys, and we started teaching boys. And that leads us to present-day Ursuline. So we've been in the Diocese of Youngstown, in the Youngstown area, for 140 years.
But I'd like to bring Sister Norma in on this now. The 1500s, translating that to the 21st century. How has that transformed the Ursulines in light of your charism, and how has that charism been continued over these many centuries?
Well, St. Angela really believed that you could be holy and still be involved. The call to holiness, she believed in contemplation and action and in responding to the needs of the times. And here, now our charism is the same. We base our service on responding to the needs of God's people. And we've been creative and flexible in moving from education in the schools into a variety of ministries. And most of them were inspired by individual sisters who, like we see as Angela, who had the courage, the relationships, the networking that she had, a woman that attracted others. And so we continue through all the centuries. Now we're trying to do our part, and basically it was living the gospel. And we're trying to translate that into our times and respond to the needs of our times.
And of course, she dedicated her order to St. Ursula.
Yes.
Tell us about that, sister.
St. Ursula was a very popular saint at the time of St. Angela Merici. She was a young woman who chose martyrdom over giving up her faith. So Angela's love of the faith certainly prompted her to dedicate the community to St. Ursula. And that's why we're called Ursulines, after St. Ursula. Some people, when they see our names and they see OSU after them, always think Ohio State University. But it really means the Order of St. Ursula.
Sure. We're down to the last few minutes of our time for our first segment. You know, Sister Norma, you alluded to some of the different ministries that the Ursuline sisters are engaged in. It's no longer just religious women in high schools and grade schools. So you've seen those ministries kind of develop over the years. And you had mentioned it's because particular women within the order have felt some kind of call to respond to that.
Yeah.
Give us one example of that.
Well, one would be Sister Margaret Sheets, who was teaching math at Mooney and computers, and she saw a documentary, God Bless the Child, of a homeless woman. And she presented that to the leadership team, and she was supported. She just said she found a house. She believed that the money would come if she kept moving, and we moved from one house now to 4 buildings on the north side, 1 on the west side, and also we were invited to Trumbull County and Ashtabula County because of the need at our times for responding to the needs of homeless women and children. And it's
isn't that
been
the call,
25 years now.
Isn't that the call of consecrated religious life, to really respond to the needs? Because while most religious communities retain their charism throughout the centuries, sometimes that changes. But yet there's the spark of what it was intended to be is always there, but that continues to change. How have you seen that charism maybe not change, but maybe grow?
I think in her writings, Angela said to us, her followers, if the times need it, change with them. And that's what we've tried to do. And I think we've been very blessed in starting out as teachers, because in a teaching order, there are many transferable skills. We've learned to do a lot of things. One of the things that I think Sister Norma mentioned earlier, the schools have made many connections for us. And the people that we've educated, the people that we've worked with, have certainly been a blessing to us as we ventured into these new areas. And they've helped us with their expertise, their time, their treasure, and it's been a blessing for us.
For more information on that current issue, visit the website of the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown at www.doi.org. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
The Johnsons enjoy Friday dinners out. Nothing fancy, just time together to reconnect as family. They make sure others eat as well. By giving to Catholic Charities of Youngstown, the Johnsons join other angels who care for those in need, regardless of religion or race. Show your wings with a gift to Catholic Charities, changing lives one family at a time, providing housing, emergency financial assistance, senior services, and more. Give now at ccdoi.org.
The song we have for you today is from the CD called Come Unto Me. It is by Reno Angelini.
When they had eaten their meal, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Jesus replied, feed Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, Peter said. You know that I love you. Jesus replied, feed my lambs, tend my sheep. A third time Jesus asked him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because the Lord had asked the third time, do you love me? So he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know well that I love Jesus said, feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep. Peter, if you love me more, feed my sheep. Peter, if you love me more, feed my
And to tell us about the scriptures for this 23rd Sunday in Ordinary Time is Father Larry Frent.
People look for miracles all of the time. Most of us believe that it would be so nice if some wonderful, unexpected event would suddenly come into our lives and make everything better for us. We'd consider it to be a miracle if we would win the lottery. If you think about the odds of winning the lottery, it would seem pretty miraculous if your number would be picked. It would be even more miraculous if I'd win the lottery because I don't buy lottery tickets. I'm afraid that I'd have too many long-lost friends and relatives come into my life, or I'd have a heart attack when I'd learn that I won. Miracles don't always need to be associated with sudden material gain. In fact, it is better not to think of miracles in purely materialistic ways. The author of the 139th Psalm considered how his own human life developed, how he was fashioned before being born, and considered this to be a miracle, praying, I give you thanks that I am fearfully, wonderfully made. This makes us look at miracles a little closer. Just the fact that we are made as we are is miraculous. Today's gospel features a miracle having to do with two very human things that we do so very often, the miracle of hearing and the miracle of speaking. The story tells us that some people brought a man unable to hear and unable to speak to Jesus. Christ enabled the man to hear and speak, and the onlookers marveled at this. Experts tell us that there is such a close connection between hearing and speaking. Children learn to talk by listening to and imitating the speech of other people. Anyone who doesn't believe that needs only to say the wrong thing to a young child at the wrong time, and it's guaranteed that you and many others will hear the child repeat it many times over. Isn't it a miracle that we can hear and speak? Many of us probably know people who wear hearing aids. Sometimes we feel sorry for them, but sometimes we envy their ability to turn off the sounds that they'd rather not hear. I wonder, even if we don't wear hearing aids, are there some things God wants us to hear better? In other words, are there things that God wants us to hear that we have chosen to shut out all too often? Things like be more patient, be less judgmental, consider the source anytime someone takes delight in spreading gossip, be willing to do better than what we do. It's remarkable to consider that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Doesn't that speak loudly to us about the miracle that we are wonderfully made? And does it tell us anything concerning how much more we are expected to listen than to talk? The author Barbara Beckwith brings out the truth that we always stand in need of opening our ears to hear God speaking to us through better ideas. Perhaps we need to better appreciate the simple miracles, that we can hear God's voice lovingly invite us to change for the better. God seeks to touch the gift of speech that He has given to us. How often does He encourage us to speak the warm words, the tender words, the kind words, the words that tell other people that we care? Do these words go unspoken all too often? When someone lifts our spirits by speaking these words, isn't that a kind of miracle? Doesn't the Lord invite us to be agents of miracles today by the loving words He enables us to speak? 2 closing thoughts. First, when you look up the subject of hearing in an encyclopedia online, notice that it comes before the word heart. By coincidence, it made me wonder, might God be telling us to listen with our hearts? Notice that hearing helps us keep our balance. Anyone who has ever had an inner ear infection can relate to that. So, what balance between hearing and speaking will enrich our lives and the lives of those around us this week? For Wineskins, this is Father Larry Frent.
The power of Christ to put a person back on their feet and give them the strength to face up to the troubles of life, no matter what they are, is even more amazing than opening the eyes of the blind or the ears of the deaf. The day of miracles is still with us. Do you believe in miracles? Wineskins is made possible through the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts. The program is produced by CTNY, the Catholic Telecommunications Network of Youngstown. I'm Father Jim Corda, saying thank you for being with us. Have a blessed week.